Alright, now that you've got your CD decks out of the way, or your turntables out of the way, and your mixers out of the way, we've only got a couple more parts to the setup that you gotta do. Obviously, you gotta have speakers. And you also need to have cables to connect the speakers. Now, there are many different types of speakers that you can get, but generally when you're first starting off, you need to get basically your full range speaker, which is what most of the DJ speakers are. There's also subwoofer speakers, which we'll get into a little bit later. Basically, you want to buy full range speakers. They come in cabinets. You can generally get the woofers, which is the main speaker, which covers the mids and the lows. You can get the woofers in sizes ranging anywhere from like 10 to 12 to like 15 inches. And then there's a little tweeter horn up the top of them, which puts out your highs. So basically your mids and lows are covered by the woofer, and your highs are carried by the tweeter. Now, if you wanted to add a subwoofer to your setup, you could get a subwoofer, and then basically what the subwoofer would do is it would filter out the lows of your full range speakers, and your full range speakers would only cover mids and highs, and your subwoofer would cover the lows. Subwoofers are good to add to your setup if you're doing a lot of dances, or if you're doing a club where they don't have their own house speakers, which, you know, if you do a small bar or something like that, that could be totally feasible. You know, that could totally be a situation that you'd encounter. But subs are generally needed for the low end, and if you're doing a lot of high energy, high-powered gigs with a lot of dancing and a lot of people, you're definitely going to want to incorporate a subwoofer into your setup. But for starters, the necessary speakers are the full-range speakers. Some brands that I highly recommend for full-range speakers are JBL. Love JBL. JBL makes many different models and sizes. Just pick one that's basically in your budget. JBL makes great speakers. I've got no problems with them. Another great company for speakers, but it's a little bit pricey, is Mackie. Mackie makes an SRM series, which is very great, and Mackie also makes an SWA series for active subwoofers, and they're amazing. I have the Mackie SWA 1501 active subwoofer, and the thing is, it puts out nice, deep, tight lows, and it's one of the best subs I've ever used. The 1801 is an even larger version with an 18-inch woofer in it, and that thing is a beast, let me tell you. Another brand for speakers which is very good are EVs, Electro Voice. Electro Voice makes great speakers. I've used a number of their speakers in the past. Even some PVs aren't too bad speakers, depending on what you find. They're really more band-oriented, PVs are, but there are a couple PV models out there that are pretty good for DJ use. But as far as speakers go for DJ, I highly recommend JBL, highly recommend Mackie, and I highly recommend Electro Voice EV. Those three are great speakers. Just basically find one that's in your budget for that range and go get them. Last thing is the cables. We need the cables to hook all our gear up. Now, when you buy most turntables and you buy most CD players, you are going to have the RCA jacks, you know, the red and white basically. Everyone knows the red and white cables. You see them on basically all audio gear. And those will generally come with the CD players. Those go from the outputs of the CD players to the inputs of your mixer. Okay? And then generally on the back of your mixer, you're going to have master outputs. They're going to either have one of two or both connectors. They're either going to have unbalanced connectors are going to have the same RCA cables going out. Those are not your first choice because unbalanced can't go as far of a distance as balanced cables. And generally the quality is not as good. Most of the better mixers will have balanced outputs, and those mixers usually have an XLR output, which looks a little bit something similar to this. It'll either be male or female coming out of your mixer, and then the other end of your XLR cable is going to go directly into either your amplifier or your speakers, which leads me to my next debate. Active or passive speakers? If you have the money, definitely go for active speakers. Active speakers have an amplifier built into the speaker. They're also more fail-safe than passive speakers, which you have to run to an amplifier first. Pros to buying active speakers are obvious. The amplifier is built into the speaker. You only have to carry one speaker, and you don't have to carry an amplifier, which is heavy in and of itself. Now, it does make the speaker weigh more because the amps are built into the speakers. However, it's also good because if your amplifier goes and you're using passive speakers, guess what? There's your party. Your amplifier goes, it fries, your whole party's done. You got no power to power those speakers. However, if you have active speakers and they have amplifiers built into them, if one of them goes, well, guess what? You can still run the party on the other speaker with the amp built in. It can literally save your ass. So I can't recommend more than to go with active speakers if you can afford them. If you absolutely can't afford them, you can buy yourself a reasonable pair of passive full-range speakers, and then you can buy yourself an amplifier. If you do that method, brands for amplifiers, I would go with Crown or QSC. I would go with nothing but Crown, QSC. That's all I stick to with amplifiers. Crown makes amazing amps. Find one in your price range, either used or new. QSC, same thing. Great amps. If you can't afford one new, go look for one used. As far as cables go, again, most RCA cables, the red and white ones, will be included with the CD decks. You'll probably have to buy the cables that go from the mixer to your speakers or the mixer to your amplifier. And the types of connectors on those cables will vary depending on what your outputs are on the mixer and what your inputs are on the amplifier or the speakers.